Do you like extra content?
Do you like supporting your favorite creators?
Well, do we have good news for you? We have a Patreon. No, not a Patreon, a patron.
What's the difference? Literally nothing, except for the fact that our patron is through Podbean. We have donation tiers at $1, $3, $5, $10, and $15 per month.
At $1, you can join our Discord server and have access to monthly bonus content. At the $3 tier, you can watch our unedited video versions of our podcasts that are definitely not safe for work.
To join, just visit our link tree in the episode description and click Become a Patron.
Welcome, everyone, to the brand new episode of You Hate to See It, or should I say, the Adam and Nick Show. I'm Adam.
I'm Nick.
And this week, we welcome the writer of the Star Wars Holiday Special and two-time Emmy winner, Bruce Vilanch. Welcome to the podcast, Bruce.
Delighted. I would give you an imperial greeting if I knew one.
Yeah, I know Nick and I were very excited to get you on because especially Nick, we like Star Wars, and we really want to talk to you a little bit about that, but also talk about some other things that you've done throughout your life. We'll get to you working on the Star Wars Holiday Special a little bit later on in the show. But first, just as Nick and I have been left without our third, and it's now just a duo. You've worked on some duos before, such as the Donnie and Marie show, and also other variety shows like the Brady Bunch Variety Hour. So what are some of your experiences on those shows with the casts and actors and stuff?
Donnie and Marie was a hit actually, and so I was with her for a few years. And they were young. Marie turned 18 on the show, so we had a big sort of coming out party for her because she was becoming an adult. Bob Mackie came in and just started designing clothes for a young woman as opposed to for a high school girl. And Donnie was older, but he was very eager. They grew up in this huge ball of wax. It was religion and show business and family, and they never really were kids. They were working. Marie, oddly enough, Marie was the one who wanted to work, who wanted to be a star, and Donnie was the breakout. And I don't think he was happy about that because he created a world for himself. He had a workshop in the basement, and he would retreat to the workshop and don't bother me. I'm in my workshop, and they would also say, don't leave him alone. He's in his workshop. And I was convinced that was the way he got away from all of them. But it was quite a stifling atmosphere. I mean, there was a lot of money and a lot of religion and a lot of sincere religion. They're not phony religionists. They were real. They were deep Mormons. They're the real thing. But deep Mormons have lots of restrictions. So here they were in Hollywood, surrounded by heathens. I mean, the first day I was sitting at my desk, and I was enjoying a cocktail at my desk. I had a little Bloody Mary kit, and I was thumbing through the physician's drug reference to see what I could buy that afternoon. And I was smoking. I used to smoke cigarettes, and Olive Osmond, who was the mother of the Osmonds, walked in. And they had 14 kids, George and Olive. We called George the Mount of Olives. And she looked at me and she said, smoking, drinking, and are those hard drugs? Are those drugs I see on your desk? How can you do this to yourself? How can you do this to your body? Your body is a temple. And I said, mixing meat with milk, you heathen. Toy. So, the Jews, we speak up. And so I said, look, you've got your Mormon Mishigas, I've got my Hebrew Mishigas. Let's just call it truce. And that was that. I never had a problem with her. Of course, I was careful to respect all of their things. You could never have a coffee break on the show because they don't drink coffee or do anything caffeinated. There was a whole list of, a very long list of things. In fact, the network censor had nothing to censor. Everything got sent to the elders in Salt Lake, and she was reduced to timing the flashes on the strobe lights in the disco scenes, because it's at a certain frequency it sends epileptics into seizures. So you had to make sure that you weren't broadcasting that sequence of light flashing, and that was her job. She was just there with a stopwatch counting the strobe lights, because everything else had been blanched from the script. So she had nothing to and they all tend to they get married very young. As soon as they're 18, they get married because they're so frustrated. They're so pent up.
Mhm.
So everybody got married early. It was a fascinating culture clash. It was the Mormons and the people and the Jews who variety television. It comes from vaudeville and showbiz, and all those things where Jews flourished, and so it was always an interesting meeting of the cultures.
And then what about your time on the Brady Bunch
Well,
variety hour?
the Brady's happened because the Brady kids had an act. They would go out to like state fairs, and they would do their dances and stuff, and they were okay. But Fred Silverman, who invented the idea of co-host Sonny and Cher, Tony Orlando and Dawn, and these were all his ideas. Um, and he wanted the Partridge Family to do a show about themselves where they played themselves, and and then they'd have guests, but they didn't want to do it. So he looked at the Brady Bunch, and he decided the Brady Bunch could do it. So I said, this is too good. Florence Henderson was a friend of mine, and she said, please come and do this. Please help. So, okay, I'll give it a twirl. And it was nuts because, in the show, they live at a house in Malibu where they have an Olympic-sized pool because we had water ballerinas. Because the Donnie Marie had ice skaters, so we had water skaters, and so that was. And you see on the set they'd be diving around. There was the Pacific Ocean in the background. It was very weird. And they did a weekly variety show, and the guest stars would come and visit them at the house, and then everybody would go to the studio. It was all in the studio shooting, but then we go to the studio and we would do the show that they were on, the sketches and stuff. And I mean, they were okay for the sitcom, which was all about them and the kids, but this was more adult and involved dealing with people like Lucille Ball and Paul Lynde and Vincent Price and all of that. So it was all very. And then of course Florence was the only real Broadway performer, so she got to do a lot. We called the show One Captain and One Tennille and Seven Captains, and of course Robert Reed, the dad, was the worst of all. He was game, but he really couldn't do any of the stuff. So I dressed him up as Carmen Miranda. And years later, when the Brady Bunch movie was released, which was a parody of the Brady Bunch,
Yeah.
Nickelodeon, which is owned by Paramount, had put out, and they owned the Brady Bunch, had put out the movie, and so they exhumed the Brady Bunch Variety Hour and showed it as a promotional thing for the Brady Bunch movie. And I was up one night and I got this call, dude, I'm watching this show, and there's the dad from the Brady Bunch. He's dressed as Carmen Miranda, and your name is on it, dude. What the fuck? And it was like, maybe 30 years later, and I had to explain to him, well, once upon a time.
So I was trying to go through some of your IMDb and stuff like that, and I saw that your first, and you've done a lot.
Yeah, I have an agent who said, lose the last few pages. It makes you sound real old.
Yeah.
What's it going to do?
It shows that your first writing credit was for a 1976 TV movie called Charo.
Oh, it was a pilot. It was a pilot for a series starring Charo. Yeah, probably was my first. My first one was, I think, the Manhattan Transfer, but Charo followed on the heels of the Manhattan Transfer. Charo was a big talk show star, and she holds the record of the most Love Boat appearances of anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But which could win you a trivia night. Trust me, hang on to that factoid, because you'll be in a bar some night and they'll say, that'll be the question. You go, Charo, and you'll get a bucket of beer. She had a pilot where she played the wife of a Marine. It was called Charo and the Sergeant. God. And it didn't go. And so this was the second attempt at a pilot. And it was the same premise as the Brady Bunch. Charo was Charo, a big star living in Beverly Hills, and she would do a show every week, like this was what Jack Benny did. And she'd have guest stars on the thing, and the guest star for the pilot was Mike Connors, who had a show called Mannix, a private eye show, very tough private eye, and so it was funny watching the two of them carry on. And then she had, of course, her household personalities or whatever. And the show aired, and it got a gigantic rating. We didn't know why. I mean, Charo obviously was the reason, but also I think maybe the competition was not so great. And the network went crazy because they didn't know whether they wanted to do this pilot, and they wound up not doing it and paying us all as if we had done a whole season of the Charo show. And I still have the binder. It's the only gold lame binder on my shelf. Because somebody, whoever in the office thought, well, it's Charo, it just can't be plain. It's got to have a little coochie on it. So.
Yeah. So your longest stint of writing was for the Academy Awards. You wrote for the Academy Awards from '89 to 2014.
That's true. Yeah, I did 25 years of it.
What is the process of like writing for an award show like that? Like, how much is scripted? How much is improvised? Like, how do you go about that?
Well, as we saw this week, as I think we saw this week, some of it is improvised.
Yeah,
I suspect that was what happened. I think I don't think anybody wrote that for him. I think he wrote it, and I think he improvised it.
Yeah.
But generally, everything is written. Everything except the acceptance speeches is written, and the occasional ad lib.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the occasional ad lib, like and anything that the hosts do is in the prompter, unless something happens. I mean, I suspect that Amy Schumer's Ukrainian remark was introduced by Amy Schumer on the fly, and she said it like she was shoving it in there just so it could be on the record.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, everything is said, and everything is vetted through 1,000 different people. Nothing goes on the air without people knowing about it.
So I mentioned this at the top of the show that you won 2 Emmys at the 63rd and 64th Emmys for your writings, and you were nominated 5 other times. You also have written for the Emmys, written for the Tonys, written for the Grammys. How is...
I'm a goat.
Yeah.
I'm a goat. An EGOT, not a goat. I'm not a goat. I'm an EGOT. I'm sorry. I'm having a dyslexic moment. I'm an EGOT. I've written for all 4 of those shows. Yes. I've only won awards for the Emmys, but I've written for all those shows.
So can you talk a little bit about what it was like winning 2 Emmys back-to-back years, mind you?
Well, they were both Billy Crystal shows. The first one was Billy's second time as a host, and it was the Jack Palance year, which you may or may not know about. But do you know about it?
That's the one that he did one-armed push-ups, right?
He did one-armed push-ups. Well, he won for his performance in Billy's movie City Slickers, in which Billy basically cast him, and he made some kind of a joke about Jack in the monologue. And so when Jack won, he came on, and the first thing he said was, "Billy Crystal, I crap bigger than him."
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, oh, well, he's lowered the bar considerably. We can do whatever we want. And then he proceeded to do this rambling speech. And then to show everybody how virile he was, he got down and did one-arm push-ups. And Whoopi, who was giving him the award, was standing behind him. And she was kind of like, she couldn't quite believe it. But we looked at it and we realized that we had to throw out everything we had and go with a run of Jack Palance jokes. It would be the theme for the evening. And the fact that we did all that as the show was going on backstage was what basically won us the Emmy that year for variety show writing. And then the following year, we had Jack come out like Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, and he was lugging a gigantic Oscar that Billy was riding. Show how strong he is, and they liked that too, and they gave us an Emmy 2 years in a row. And the first year, Billy didn't think we would win. He was on vacation in Hawaii with his family and didn't want to come back. So we all got to speak because nobody was going to cut off the writers. Nobody who was on producing the Emmy show was going to cut off the writers of the Oscar show because they were all people he worked with.
Yeah.
The second year, Billy made sure he was there, and we won, and Billy got to make the speech. But the first year, I was the last writer to speak, and they had all thanked their wives and their this and their that. And I just came on and I said, I'm very sorry I didn't have to sleep around more to win this. And then they went to commercial, and the director on the PA said, "Thanks for giving me the joke to get us out." Baby, I'm such a pro.
Yeah.
I was so proud of myself.
So how is the writing process between all of those 4 shows different, or is it basically the exact same thing every time?
It's pretty close to the same thing. I mean, the on the Emmys, the problem is you're writing about the same shows, you know. I mean, every year that Game of Thrones is up, you're writing about Game of Thrones, and it tends to get a little monotonous. On the other shows, you have new product every year that you're writing about, so it's very different. And you have different hosts, and you wind up serving the host that you've got that year, and then you really can't do a whole lot of real writing until the nominees are announced, because then you know what you're writing about, and you know who's going to exercise the ritual taking of umbrage that they haven't been nominated. And, you know, you see the playing field. So what that means is a lot gets written in a very short time. There's a lot of time sitting around spitballing, and then you actually, as George Slaughter, producer, used to say, that you don't get to the Remington until, you know, like a month before. But it's very much, and then it never stops. I mean, you're literally writing throughout the live broadcast. As things happen, you're changing things, and all sorts of stuff, you know, goes down.
Yeah. And then, you know, someone just walks up on stage and slaps the shit out of the host. It's
well, that was the first. I have to say, yeah. I don't think I've ever. I was trying. I mean, I said there's a movie called The Original Star Is Born, not the original, but the Judy Garland. He's drunk and he slaps her by accident. But I don't think there's ever been actual violence on stage.
Yeah.
And, it's sad, you know. Will is such a sweet guy, and there's just something snapped.
Well, yeah, I mean, as the years keep going on, people seem to care less and less about these kinds of award shows anyway. And now the only talking point of the award show is a negative thing. Like, these shows are already hurting. Like,
I know, it's too bad because it overshadowed all the good stuff. The Coda, which is a beautiful movie, and it's a landmark movie because it's about deaf people playing themselves, and Troy Kotzer winning, and that's pretty wonderful. And Ariana DeBose, who's identifying as a queer woman of color, and the Latinx, whatever the word is now, I can't keep up. Yeah. I mean, all of those things. It's just it overshadowed all of that, and that's really too bad because it was a good year in that regard.
And I feel more bad for Serena Williams and that family, because now this is what's fought. Like, this is now the legacy of that movie of King Richard is this. Like, no matter what happens.
That's true. That's true. You're absolutely right. King Richard himself has come out and condemned Will for his behavior.
Yeah. So now I want to kind of swivel into some of your acting credits, some of those things that you've done. So how does it feel being immortalized as yourself in The Simpsons? And what was that like doing that?
Probably my highest achievement. And I discovered that because it's like people I grew up with say, it was season 11, and they're now season 35. So when it first happened, I would get kids I grew up with saying, "My children love me now because I know you, because they saw you on The Simpsons." And then now it's become, "My grandchildren love you now because they saw you on The Simpsons." So that says something about The Simpsons. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But it was great. I was on Hollywood Squares, and so the joke was about Hollywood Squares, and it was a one-line thing. And I went in and recorded it, and they give you a trunk as a gift of Simpsons memorabilia, which is they're not selling. It's they just make up this line. So I have all this valuable, one-of-a-kind Simpsons memorabilia. My favorite is Homer Simpson bowling ball, and it looks like an egg yolk with little fine strands of blood going through it, and then it has no holes. And you kind of look for the holes, and there are three red dots and a magic marker, and it says "drill here." So it's utterly unusable as a bowling ball.
Yeah.
Uh, and it comes with its own case and all that. So it's full of that kind of stuff. And the other highlight of the day was as I was recorded my one line and I was leaving, a huge limousine pulled up and Elizabeth Taylor got out and she was going in to record her one line. She's Maggie the baby. And the only thing Maggie's ever said is, I think, Mama or Goo Goo or something like that. That's Elizabeth Taylor. And she got a trunk too. And later on, we were working on an AIDS benefit. We compared items in our trunk, and we had different stuff. They knocked themselves out coming up with stuff. It struck me they were all prototypes for things they knew they couldn't sell.
Yeah. So you've also played yourself in movies like You Don't Mess with the Zohan
Yes.
and shows like The Nanny. So like, what was your
Yeah.
experience on those two
Well,
projects? Or
Zohan was Adam Sandler, and it was his big Jew movie. He was an Israeli, Mossad guy. He was
everyone's got
starring
to
Jews.
have one. The
Jews are
big Jew
tough.
movie.
And it's a Jew movie, and Jews are tough. And I said, "Yeah, go get them. Let's prove something." And because it's been a long haul since Paul Newman, let's prove something. And he called because he didn't like. He had an ending he wasn't happy with. He had Dave Matthews playing the Nazi villain, the Klan guy, and he wanted to give him some sort of bizarre end, not just to have him die. So he had this idea, and uh, uh, he's he has he's stolen some rare beagle puppies who he's going to sell to finance his nefarious scheme, and then something happens and he blows up. And he is sent sky high and he lands crashing through the skylight of an apartment in Greenwich Village, where he lands on the couch between me and George Takei, who are a married couple having a cocktail party. And he lands between us, and the cage of dogs lands on the other side of George. And we're like, we have no idea who he is, but we love the puppies. And we start in with the puppies. And he suddenly realizes that he is surrounded by queens. And it's like, these are all gay people. And it's like the ultimate torture for this guy. And that was the end of it. And it was just one scene. And, we ad-libbed everything that we said. So it was a lot of fun. And Adam he'd wrapped the rest of the movie, and he was already working on another picture called Bedtime Stories on the next stage. And he came over, he had broken his foot, so they wheeled him over. And he was watching. He didn't direct it, but he was watching it. And we did a bunch of takes, and he was throwing lines at us, and we were throwing lines at him. And it was great fun, and they paid us a fortune. There's a studio movie, So it was great. And I can't tell you how many people have said to me, "Oh, Zohan," especially like people who go to Adam Sandler movies, or watch them on TV or something like that. They may not speak English that well, but they look at me and they go, "Zohan."
And then you were on The Nanny playing yourself again?
I was on The Nanny because it was the Hollywood Squares thing. Mr. Sheffield is a guest on the Hollywood Squares. We're doing Broadway Week on the Hollywood, which we actually did in New York, but this was we shot it at Fran's studio at Culver City.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually, they may have come and shot on our set, but it was Mr. Sheffield. It was Chuck Shaughnessy is on the show along with a lot of other famous Broadway people, and we had a bunch of actors, and us. And Fran comes in, of course, as Fran, and I forget what the plot was, but she she worms her way onto the set and she gets stuck in a square, and it's a whole thing. And it constantly airs in reruns, and I get $1.98, every night. It's terrific. And I can say I was on The Nanny.
So how do you go about playing yourself, and like what's the difference between like playing a caricature or a character version of yourself and you as an actual human being? Like what's
Well, it depends on the material. I mean, sometimes they give me a line that's something I actually would say, and sometimes I'll say that that's not going to sound right coming out of me, and we fix it. So my peril is that I will be a heightened version of myself, so it'll be like too much energy and hungry, and it's not like sitting back now and just sort of talking, which is what most of those things require.
Yeah.
But it's very weird. And one of the things that happens on a show like the Oscars is a lot of actors come out to give an award and they don't have a character to play. And unless they're the kind of people who do one-man shows or nightclub acts or Vegas, they don't really know who they are when they're not in character. And so you kind of have to try to give them a character, or at least you have to give them something to say about the category that supersedes that they can just kind of make an observation as themselves. But that is a difficult kind of writing, believe it or not. And so some of them wind up coming up with characters because they, like Johnny Depp, who was a rocker and then, a movie star, but then he adopted a character that was some partially Jack Sparrow and partially Hunter Thompson. And that's his talk show character.
Mm-hmm. In my research, a lot of places stated that your first acting credit was playing the dress manufacturer in the 1975 film Mahogany, but I found some acting credit, but I'm not 100% sure if you were even in this movie. And from 1971, you Tante Rosa, and My Name is Rocco Papaleo.
My Name is Rocco Papaleo, which is an Italian actor called Permette Rocco Papaleo, and later got released as Rocco in Chicago. And it was in Chicago. I was writing for the Trib, and I was in a restaurant, and the producer came over to me and said, "I like your face. I want you in my picture." So I said, "Okay, fine." And it was his name was Ettore Scola, and he became a big Italian director. This was, I think, maybe his first feature, and it was Marcello Mastroianni, who was a huge international star, and it has a distinction of being the only Marcello Mastroianni movie to flop in Italy. And this takes a lot because he was like huge. And it was about a guy who was down in his luck, and he came he went to Canada. He was imported to Canada to work in a coal mine. And a whole bunch of the Italian guys find out that their favorite fighter is going to fight in Chicago. And so they get on a bus and they cross the border to Chicago to be at the fight. And he speaks no English. And he kind of gets lost in Chicago. And the first thing he sees is a huge ad for Virginia Slims with Lauren Hutton. And he falls madly in love with Lauren Hutton. And as this is happening, Lauren Hutton crosses the street in front of him, and he can't believe it. She's in Chicago doing something. And he becomes kind of a stalker of Lauren Hutton. And eventually they hook up, and as he falls for him, and it ends the way it would end, which is they separate ways. But he winds up, he gets mugged, and he is taken by a kindly old alcoholic woman into a bar where fighters hang out, and it's run by me. And I am an ex-pug with a broken nose, so I had coil springs in my nose, so it would look really broken. Mm-hmm. And I'm also very flamboyantly gay, but I run this bar for all these fighters. This was a very Italian concept. Yeah. Obviously, this would not happen in real life Chicago. And I was called Tanta Rosa, Auntie Rosa, and I had a hairnet on the whole time. And for 3 weeks, I had to have a 2-day growth of beard, and it would be shaved back every day. And that's why I grew my beard out after 3 weeks and said, I'll never shave again. It took 32 years, and I did hairspray, and I couldn't talk them into the woman being a bearded lady, so I had to shave it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did this movie, and it was we had a lot of fun doing it. And I love Marcello because who spoke English but didn't want to because he was afraid he would sound like, like Chico Marx, like I'm not gonna hit you so bad, you know. And he was afraid. I said, you don't sound like that, but he didn't like it, and so we speak French. And he was living with Catherine Deneuve, French actress, and she was there, and so we all we had a blast, and the whole movie was dubbed. I mean, we recorded every line, and then it was dubbed into a million different languages. It was like the way they do it in Europe. It was weird. That came before Mahogany. That's true. Mahogany was after that.
So how much did you actually write of the Star Wars holiday special?
Well, a lot. I mean, there was a team, as I recall. First of all, I have to say, if we'd known we'd be talking about this thing 40 years later, we would have paid closer attention. That's number one. And number two, it was the 70s, and anybody who tells you they remember the 70s wasn't there. We were all sort of baked. I mean, and I talk about this, and then I get tear sheets from people saying, Vilanch, who admits to copious drug abuse. It wasn't copious. We roll a blunt and we would work it off as we were working. And this wasn't. I mean, I joke that Carrie Fisher and Carrie was a much more extreme drug user than I, but we would get to snorting the sweet and low in the cafeteria. That's because it looked good. But the truth is, no. I mean, we weren't. Everybody had sort of a mellow buzz going on. I mean, everybody who was my age at that point, the older ones, of course, were too busy pouring bourbon on the rocks to have to worry about, rolling dubs. But so that's there. And the other thing I have to mention is that, and this pisses people off who love Star Wars, is that when we did that show in 1978, Star Wars was not a big deal. Yeah. Star Wars had been a summer picture that was a blockbuster. It was among the first blockbusters. I mean, I think Jaws was a blockbuster, the very first blockbuster like that opened in 3,000 screens and everybody went to see. But George hadn't started shooting The Empire yet, so it could have been a one-off, and a lot of people viewed it as a kind of a silly sort of spoof of Republic serials that I used to go to on Saturday morning, science fiction movies that they would see when they were kids, that always had a cliffhanger, and you would come back the next week to see how it resolved or it continued. And that Star Wars was kind of a riff on that, and it wasn't until much, much later, after the three pictures came out, and then everybody, the next generation, saw them on VHS and DVD, that it became the Scientology of the nerds.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize we were treading on religious ground when we did it. And of course, the internet allowed us to realize that that's what had happened, especially because one of the wonderful tangents of the internet was people discovered the Star Wars holiday special, which had came and went in one night the week before Thanksgiving of 1978. And they were astonished and betrayed. And they besieged George and saying, "How could you do this to us?" And of course, George got scared. Who could blame him? I mean, they were coming after him. I mean, it was almost like watching Will Smith come towards you.
Yeah.
It was terribly, terribly scary. So he tried to destroy all the copies and pretended it never happened. But of course, every time he did a new Star Wars venture, it would come up again. And now he's done 10 of them. And he finally caved in and gave Lego the rights to do the Star Wars Lego Holiday Special, which referenced the old show. And I think also was a way for him, he's determined to get Life Day into the calendar as an actual holiday. And, I mean, he has probably not noticed that, May 4th has become a holiday already. May the 4th be with you.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. I think he really wants to have. But I said to him, Festivus never really had traction either.
Yeah.
Seinfeld, Festivus for the rest of us, never really had traction. So it's tough to get one of those things going, and it takes many generations generally. So anyway, he allowed them to do this. It was almost like his way of saying, "Yeah, right. There was a Star Wars holiday special, and now we're going to do it the right way." So he did it with Legos.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a Daisy Ridley Lego, looked like Rosie O'Donnell. So I mean, they didn't come out of it unscathed either.
Everything you just said about early Star Wars is blasphemy, apparently.
Yeah.
My
Was blasphemy. Exactly.
yeah.
I've been canceled by by everybody on Tatooine.
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, Disney's pretty much stolen your hatred. So
Have they? I thought, but they made so much. They make so much money off of it.
they made so much money, but everyone hates them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they hate Rebel One and
Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff. That's
Yeah.
stuff that people actually like. Rogue
Yeah.
One, people like Rogue One.
Yeah.
They just hate
The
Rogue
three
One.
big Star Wars movies.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
the
hated
episode
7, 8, and
7,
9.
yeah.
7, 8,
They
and 9?
hate
They did.
those.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah.
And Solo. And
But I like Solo.
I
okay?
also like Solo, but
Well,
people
I
don't.
but
Solo.
everything else is fantastic. As
I liked Solo because I'm gay and it was about a hot guy. So,
Yeah.
but at last, my demographic was being served.
Yeah.
everything else is really good. I watch all of that stuff with my girlfriend. My current relationship is essentially just based off the Star Wars. So
Yeah, the last three, the Force Arises, the Force Ejaculates, whatever those titles
Yeah.
were. I was amazed to see that Lupita Nyong'o never speaks a word of any known language, and everything she says is subtitled. And also, I mean, because were we able to use subtitles on the Star Wars Holiday Special, it would have been a different show altogether. You actually would have been able to see what the Wookiees were saying to each other, but we were not allowed to use subtitles. And of course, also Lupita Nyong'o is not recognizable in any of the Star Wars movies. She's under so much.
I'll be completely honest. I didn't know she was in them.
Yeah.
She's a tiny little, I forget. She's like a traitor or something. I don't know. She's a Yoda-esque character in the.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that okay.
That's
I didn't know
Lupita
that.
Nyong'o.
I didn't know that was her.
See, I rest my case, Your Honor.
Well, that was actually something I wanted to ask you about. Was there any dialogue actually written for the Wookiees the same way that there was for Chewbacca for the actor to physically say to Harrison Ford so he knew how to respond, or was it just random garble?
We started with indicating what he was supposed to say, and then we actually wrote the lines because Peter wanted to have some lines. He wanted to be able to, and I guess Harrison was interested in that too. Although I don't think in the movie that they necessarily did that, but who knows? Harrison, was there for a day or two, and he was also enjoying the fruits of the land, and couldn't wait to get out. He was there. Obviously, they leaned on him heavily to be a part of this. And, I'm sure they were making it worth his while, but he was, and now when you mention it to him, it's kind of he freezes over. It's almost like the end of the Empire where he freezes.
Yeah.
Right.
So this question, I went to some of our listeners. One of them asked, "How does it feel to have somehow created at the same time what's considered the worst Star Wars shows and one of its most popular characters, Boba Fett?"
Well, Boba Fett that was the one thing George did all by himself. He wanted to do an animated feature, and he couldn't actually sell it. So he had a Canadian group do a 10-minute section, which we put into the show. And that was what remains of the show, essentially.
Yeah.
So I can take no credit for Boba Fett, but how does it feel? I mean, it's 40 years ago, so I'm numb.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a book now about how I wrote the worst television shows in history, and that certainly is the way into the book. It's like it doesn't get worse than this. You don't get more criticism than this. But I'll tell you, the criticism was muted when it was on because Star Wars was so silly. It was considered so silly at that point.
Yeah.
And it was the attempt to reconstruct the universe on a cheesy budget and on a soundstage when George had spent a lot of money over in London building all these things. It was not going to make anybody who loved the movie happy.
Yeah.
it was not going to make them happy to watch them interact with CBS television stars like B. Arthur and Art Carney, and I mean, it was, or to have the new Wookiee characters be a family, uh, a tender-hearted domestic scene. And nobody tuned into Star Wars to see any of that.
Yeah.
That was a very television kind of concept, and it was basically a way to get other stars in. But George told me he'd written 10 Star Wars stories and he was going to film them. And at the time, eventually he filmed three, and then three later, and then he's kept going. But he sold off some of the early stories that he couldn't get made, and one of them was this story about the Wookiees. And I think, and he sold it to CBS, and I really believe that he thought they were going to do an original musical, uh, not a kind of pastiche of what it turned out to be. Why he thought there could be an original musical starring characters that don't speak, sing, or dance, I don't know. I don't know, but I mean, he might have given that a second thought if he really wanted to have a musical. But he's brilliant. I give him the benefit of the doubt. But we were handed this show where the central characters all sounded like fat people having orgasms.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know. So it's we were handed that, and it was a TV show, so we also had to have a lot of guest stars. I don't think he really reckoned with that. I don't think George sat home watching Sonny and Cher, and any of that stuff. I don't think that was really in George's.
Yeah. So someone else asked, who thought it was a good idea to name a Wookiee Lumpy?
George. I think his real name is Lumparuma something, which sounds very Australian, and it's Lumpy for short. Everybody's all of his fictional characters have long, elaborate names. Mm-hmm. Chewbacca is short for Chewbacca Tickatuk or something like that, and all of them. And then he gives them nicknames. Mala is actually Mala Chittichuk, and she's called Mala. That's the mother, the Mrs. Wookiee, Mrs. Mm-hmm. Chewbacca. So that was all George. That was absolutely all. That was from his canon. Yeah. So go picket Skywalker Ranch.
So you would say like the majority of this was like George's idea and like George's brain.
Certainly all the Wookiee characters. I mean, we injected the other stuff to have stars. We had Art Carney play the. Although I think George named him Sean Dan. That was George's character that he put in. Sean Dan was an intergalactic traveling salesman, like a Tupperware salesman, mm-hmm. and he comes to the Wookiee planet to deliver stuff to Mala, Mrs. Chewbacca. But he is also, of course, a rebel conspirator. He's passing information between various members of the Rebel Alliance. Of course, Chewbacca is a member of the Alliance, the Rebel Alliance, and but he's also there as what I call Morris the Explainer. He tells us what's happening, that they're in the Millennium Falcon, they're on their way home, they're trying to make it back for life. He says that all to us in English, and it's all in conversations he has with her. So he says, "How are you?" "Oh, I'm sorry, your toe hurts." and he translates all this stuff because we couldn't have subtitles. We had to have him translating. So those were the characters. Some of those characters were George came up with. We came up with Bee's character because we wanted her on the show, and we thought it would be in George's story. They stop off on Tatooine for something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they go to the cantina, and the cantina is where all the aliens are. And there had never been a person running the cantina, but we made her the Statue of Liberty be. I mean, she was on TV. She was Maude, which was a very popular CBS series pre-Golden Girls, and it was a spinoff of All in the Family. And so she was a big star, and we made her, because she could also sing. We made her the owner of the bar, and so we'd have a little variety interlude. In order to get some dancing on the show or some musical performance, George had invented these virtual reality helmets that when you put on, they kind of piped into your brain and your fantasies were explored. And I thought, wow, this has endless pornographic possibilities.
Yeah.
But we couldn't go near those, but we came close because we let the grandpa Wookiee have a fantasy about initially Cher, who bagged it a few weeks before the show, and Diane Carroll came in, and she was like his fantasy. It's very lewd when you look at it now. I mean, I'm amazed we got away with it. And I used to say to Diane, "This is the first interracial, interspecies number on network television. Where's our NAACP Image Award?"
Yeah.
And every time I saw her, I would say, "Have you heard from them yet? Have they nominated us?" So though, and we, the kid opened the kids. I think he opened the music box, and we had the Cirque du Soleil. They were very early Cirque du Soleil performers did a number in like a hologram kind of thing. So all of that was stuff that we added because our mandate was to turn it into a musical variety show. And Harvey Korman, who played 3 or 4 different characters that were all funny, including an alien Julia Child. Who's Mala's watching a cooking show, and
Yeah.
all these arms and stuff.
So who wrote the lyrics for Carrie Fisher to sing at the end? And did you guys ever hear from John Williams about putting words to his music?
That's a great. No, I think he signed off on it, and I believe it was Ken and Mitzi Welch who also wrote the song for Bee. They were writers from the Carol Burnett Show, and they were, if you've ever seen the Carol Burnett Show, they were elaborate medleys and parodies of movies that were turned into musicals. And they wrote all of that stuff, and they were very clever. But I think they were the ones who wrote that. Carrie wanted to sing a Joni Mitchell song. She wanted to sing "I Wish I Had a River," which is like Joni. It's a Christmas song that Joni Mitchell wrote, and we had to call Joni Mitchell and pitch it to her. She went, that high soprano laugh. No, so it didn't happen. Carrie was desperate to sing a song. She really wanted to sing a song because she always wanted to be a musical, comedy star. I mean, her mother was a musical comedy star. Her father was a huge singer, and one of her first jobs was on Broadway behind her mother in a musical called Irene that was a big hit that Debbie did. And so she was always looking for a career in music and not so much in acting. And the acting thing just kind of happened. But she was going to, and I don't think anybody really featured Princess Leia singing a song, but she persisted, and she got the song in the finale.
So did you guys have full access to all of the Star Wars characters, or were you guys limited to what you could use? And did you have any ideas for Darth Vader or?
No, not that I recall, because I don't believe he was in the story that George handed us. I don't think, and probably because it's hard to remember, but I would imagine he had plans for Darth Vader in the Empire, and he didn't want to confuse anybody. I don't think. I mean, this was a simple thing, like it's Han and Leia and Chewbacca, and they are going to the planet for the Life Day celebration, and it is a beginning, middle, and end. It's not a part of the canon. It doesn't affect any of the storylines of the entire saga. It was a one-off, if that's the expression we want to use.
Yeah.
My one question is, was Mark Hamill as high as he looked during it?
He may have been. I'm not sure if this was after he had the accident or before he had the accident, but he could have been. I don't know. I wasn't. Was I there? Yes, he came in and we shot it. We were at Warner Brothers, and we in the Valley, and we shot all this. So he may have been. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to put. I don't want to put dubs in his mouth, but he may very well have been. It was the flavor of the season.
Yeah.
There's a very famous picture. I think probably the most famous picture from it. It's just Mark Hamill giving it 1,000-yard stare, like he's just seeing a ghost.
Also, he has that weird hairstyle.
Yeah,
it looks like a wig.
Yeah.
80% of the
It
time.
was, even when we were doing it, I said to the director, I said, does he really want all that eyeliner? I mean, it really just, it's kind of like it looks. He's like the whole relationship with C-3PO is looking a little weird.
Yeah. The last question that I also got this one from a listener. If you could go back and do it all over again with whatever budget you wanted and do it however you wanted, what would you do differently?
Oh, it's an academic question because we couldn't do anything differently because we were handed this story and this mandate to turn it into a variety special. So I think the title of my book is going to be, It Seemed Like a Bad Idea at the Time.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, because all of these shows are like that. We knew going in that this was not a great idea, but we were going to try to make it work. And again, we didn't know that it would sit with us for 40 years. I mean, we thought this was going to be something that would be on and get a help sell a couple of Wookiee dolls, and we all move on to the next thing, and it wasn't going to live in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew? George knew. But if George knew, he wouldn't have done it.
If it was good, it probably wouldn't be popular anyway. Like, it's probably only popular because it's bad.
Well, if it had been good, I mean, if it had been something else, then George would have owned it, and it would have become part of the whole canon of the Torah of Star Wars.
So, and these aren't questions, they're comments. And one person said that he just wanted you to know that when he was a young kid and the special aired on TV, he really enjoyed it back then. He was too young to be jaded and too inexperienced to catch all the famous people or grown-up references. So to him, it was just more Star Wars, and it was great.
There we go. You're welcome.
And then another person said that he watches it every year for Christmas, and it's a Christmas tradition for something he does while he wraps presents. So
I know people who do that too. I've been to a couple of those affairs.
The last thing I wanted to talk about before of the Ice Pirates.
Ice Pirates.
And
well, that was yeah.
I've never heard of it. Saw this when I was doing research about you.
Yeah.
And I read it because I just the poster and the title caught my eye. And so I was like, what is this? Like, this seems strange and something I would love. And I read the synopsis of it, and I'm like, this is like the weirdest but yet most fantastical thing I think I've ever heard of.
It was Spaceballs light. I mean, Spaceballs shot and used some of our sets after, because Spaceballs came in right after we did. But it was a sci-fi spoof, and half serious and half just jokey. And I was brought in to do a rewrite, and Paul Williams was going to play the part, and he quit. And they said, "Okay, you can be the evil emperor." And the evil emperor gambles his body away, and he's a head, and they keep moving him from one body to another. So I said, "I'm famous for my head." There it is. And we did many jokes about that, and it was Angelica Houston's second movie, and it was kind of her father's producing partner was producing it, and when he saw her in the movie, he cast her in Prizzi's Honor, which won the Oscar for her, and he made her a movie star. So they would begin showing all of her movies on television. There were exactly two. And Ted Turner loved this movie. He ran, Turner Class, but he ran all early cable, and he would show it on every one of his stations. And as a result, a whole generation saw this movie on TV in the early 80s. And Angelica keeps saying, "I can't escape the thing." She said, "I go to interviews, and the first thing they say is, 'Tell us about the Ice Pirates.'" She said, "It's impossible." So, I said, "Yeah, I have the same problem." But it's very funny, and you will see some of the sets from Spaceballs in it, and it's people remember fondly a creature called the Space Herpy. Gives you some idea of the comedy level of the movie. It was a Space Herpy was something everybody had to avoid, and it was genuine. It was kind of like the worms from Dune, but smaller.
If I was to double feature Ice Pirates with Spaceballs, which should I watch first?
Oh, I guess Ice Pirates, because you've probably seen Spaceballs.
Mhm.
Spaceballs, it was Mel Brooks in space,
Yeah.
and it's very funny, but it's a comedy.
Yeah.
This is kind of also sort of a sci-fi fantasy, but uh, ours was done on a much lower budget, and it's ingenious, and we had lots of troubles with the studio. We had to cut the shooting schedule short, so we had to put a time warp in to explain how things ended. So it's very odd. But again, it was the '80s, and people were still quaffing and smoking, and so if you were sitting home stoned, it made sort of kind of a sense.
I'm taking notes. That's how I'm gonna watch it. Is sitting at
Oh,
home stoned.
very good.
All right. Thanks for listening to this week's episode, everyone, and thanks so much, Bruce, for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure. It's great.
Do you have anything coming up that you want to promote or anything?
What can I promote? Wow, let me think. Well, I'm going to be in San Diego on April 16th with Suzanne Westenhofer and the three of us are going to be doing like Legends of Gay Comedy, which is if gay comedy is your thing, at a place called Martini's on Fourth, which is a great club I play. The kind of performance world is just sort of coming back, and I have really nothing to plug. That I have to plug. That's about it. And a lot of stuff I've written that I can't talk about until they announce it. So
yeah, all right.
That's it.
Fair.
So thanks so much, Bruce, for coming
My
on.
pleasure.
Thanks for doing this.
Take care. It's been grand.
Thanks. If you liked the episode, come and tell us your thoughts and join the conversation by rating us and reviewing us. You can also help us out by becoming a patron to the podcast. By becoming a patron, you get access to our private Discord server, our monthly movie review podcast, and you even get access to the unedited video version of the episode you just listened to. All links are in the episode description. Okay, haters, that's it for this week. You hate to see it end there, but fear not, we shall return. Same time, same place. You'd hate to miss it.
Was he writing from prison?
I don't know.
I have to ask. I get a lot of correspondence from prisoners.
I'd like to give a special shout out. A couple weeks ago, I asked some of our audience for help coming up with a sign-off, and we got so many responses that I'm actually going to be using a bunch of them throughout all of our episodes. So a very special thanks to Ren Lopa, Michael Allen, Amir Tilk, Kev Bamboo, Nando Bien, and Ethan Silva.